everyone. I am Amy. I am the real deputy editor of Sifted. Chris O'Brien stole my job title earlier. In case I had someone who I used to work with come up to me and go, "Have you changed jobs?" And I was like, no, that's still me. But we are here to talk about health tech, which has been a pretty big deal over the past year and a half since the last F for Femme. And I am here with Dora Sabino, who is the CEO of Blazar, which combines machine learning with information about clinical outcome to improve clinical outcomes for cancer patients, which is pretty cool. Claire Novorol, who is the co-founder and chief medical officer of AIDA, which is a symptom checking app which has 10 million, probably more now, users around the world. And last but not least, on the screen here, she's actually moving. You can see she's real. She's there. She's Melissa Moore, and she is the chief scientific officer of a company you may have heard of called Moderna, which has, I've just learnt, created 500 million doses of COVID vaccine, which is enabling us all to do things like this. So, thank you very much, Melissa.
You're welcome.
So I think we should start with that. Melissa, can you remember the moment when you were like, holy shit, I think we might be able to find a solution to this drama which has totally taken over the world?
Well, we thought we could find a solution when we started working on the vaccine in January, as soon as the sequence of the virus came out. And so that was on January 10th and 11th of 2020. But it was really on I don't remember the exact date in December, it was early December of 2020 when we got the data back from our phase 3 clinical trial. And it was just better than we could ever imagined that it would be. And so that was just an amazing moment for the entire company.
Was this the first like big opportunity to use the kind of, the technology you developed to create a vaccine? Like what was that like internally, Were you all there like 24 hours a day, just like totally high on coffee, like we're gotta get this fast? Like what was it like?
Oh my God, it was amazing. It was all hands on deck, and yes, 24 hours a day, the people were working. I can't claim to have done so myself. I'm getting old and I can't stay up 24 hours a day, but many of my colleagues, especially those involved in the manufacturing part of our organization, are still working around the clock to get out as much vaccine as possible. So it was crazy, and I really wish the world could see just how dedicated everybody was inside of Moderna to really get that vaccine out as quickly as possible, but do it in a way that where we were doing everything by the book and checking, dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's. And ensuring that it was both safe and effective.
Interesting. And Claire, what about you? What was it like at AIDA when you realised, wait, we can also play our part here. We can be useful. How did you kind of, I guess, like not pivot the team, but how did you kind of get people focusing on this and behind it? And then also to Melissa's point, making sure you weren't kind of cutting any corners because this is health tech and that's not really okay.
Yeah. So there are a few things we did. I think probably first worth saying that fundamentally AIDA is around empowering people to self-assess from the comfort of their own homes. So we take into account risk factors, symptoms, with our partners, which are often large hospitals, health systems, health plans. We can do single sign-on and pull in data from the health record and take all of that into account. And then provide personalised sort of routing. So basically help people navigate to appropriate care options within the system, navigate people away from unnecessary emergency care or urgent care towards self-care where that's appropriate, telehealth where that's appropriate. And we act as the digital front door for these partners. So you can imagine that in the very early days of COVID, when clinics, hospitals were closing to the majority of patients, people didn't want to go in but often couldn't go, then having this digital access point, digital front door in order to better understand what you might have, whether it's COVID or whether it's something else, and how to access care appropriately was important for patients, and of course also important for relieving pressure on the systems, and so that was a big part really of the role we were playing. That's what we do anyway, and it was really heightened, that need, through the pandemic. We did of course also want to play our part in making sure that, as everybody did, sort of jumping on what can we do to make a difference here. So we very quickly put online a free COVID screener where we incorporated national and international guidelines, whether it was WHO, Robert Koch Institute, the Department of Health and NHS in the UK, also US guidelines. We put that online in many languages. We kept abreast of the guidelines, so we kept changing it for different countries and in different languages according to the guidelines. We also, and we integrated that into the front door with many of our partners, the websites. And we also have of course, had to model COVID in our knowledge base. And this is tricky when something is emerging and there's very little known about the symptoms. I mean, I remember in the UK it was fever and cough. There were no other symptoms mentioned in the guidance. And of course, the more we learnt about the risk factors and that impacted risk of having a severe form of COVID and the symptoms, we had to keep updating that disease model in the knowledge base, of course, as incidents, as the prevalence changed in different countries. So that meant a team being constantly on the literature, looking, seeing anything new that was coming out and continuing to model it. And maybe just to mention that actually we did a retrospective data analysis recently, and we looked at our COVID case data in the assessment across many countries and compared with publicly available government data on COVID cases over time. And we see the curves just really closely mimicking in our data the government data in each of those countries. We also saw actually a 70% increase in cases with depression in young people, in people under 18, again, repeated across multiple countries. And we do see this with other outbreaks. We see like measles outbreak in the US, other ones in Africa. We've sort of seen this trend in the data actually early, often before it's announced by the CDC and whatever. So we've been working with some of the public health institutes and other research organizations in Europe to see how we can play our role in that.
And so Dora, your company's a much earlier stage, but what have you kind of seen change in terms of, public health organizations or insurers or whoever it is you're working with? Like, how are they genuinely now much more pro working with health tech because they've had these brilliant examples of what Melissa and Claire's teams have done, to say this works, it doesn't sort of break, and it's really quite useful.
Exactly. So one of the features of this pandemic was to make it very evident that tech is there to help you. Tech provides solutions, and we saw that from our point of view, we are extremely early. At that moment, we were very, very early. We were just getting our first clinical trial data from partners. We had our models. We were excited to go into the field and do further work with our partners. And then there was COVID, right? So this made us give a step back, rethink our strategy thoroughly, and understand that what we had value. And this is the point where things shift, because everything stopped. There was no clinical trials in oncology that could be initiated at that moment. The ones that were ongoing had their own troubles. It was a moment to rethink strategies and to really prioritize partnerships with people and stakeholders that valued our initiative and wanted to use it. So for us, there was a mixed feeling of, oh damn, we need to stop what we were doing, but we can advance with something else, with the right stakeholders that have really a mindset of exploiting what we can give them and to profit for the patient. And so this is something that we always kept in the forefront of our actions, is that what we were doing had to revert in patient better outcomes. That is our grail. It's a grail of many people as well. But this situation did potentiate that, the finding who wanted to work with us and who wanted to have profit from our activity, but with that helping us as well. So I think it was a moment that was dramatic for many people. It had side effects that were, to my view, they're going to really shift the velocity at which we accept tech and at which we trust it.
Melissa, what about for you? How, you're a much bigger company. How is this, how you go about things, how you use technology changing now? And what's next? I mean, we're not done, are we, with this, unfortunately, thing yet?
Well, well, now we're over 2,000 people, but we're not by all means a particularly large company. And when COVID came, we were maybe 1,200 people. So we have really increased the size of the company in the last year dramatically, because we had to build out all of our clinical teams, commercial teams, regulatory. And so that's been a huge lift for the company. But in terms of tech, one of the things that we aspire to be is the first fully digital biotech company. And so we look everywhere in our business to how can we aggregate data, how can we capture data in a structured format so that then we can go back and do retrospective analyses on things and do machine-based learning to learn things about our manufacturing process, about our research, just everything. And so we we spend a lot of money on implementing digital solutions and building out new digital applications for us that are geared just to us, to be able to capture all of our data and then integrate it so it all plays well with each other. And so that's really one of the most exciting things about the space and about Moderna. The other thing to realize about mRNA is it is an information-containing molecule, and so in many ways it is like computer programming, because once you've figured out how to, say, make a vaccine with one mRNA, you can just swap out the sequence and you can make a new vaccine very, very easily, and that's very different from previous technologies. So we are going to we're nowhere near done. We're really moving very rapidly into many other infectious diseases. But there are many other applications for mRNA that you'll be hearing about in the coming years.
Amazing. And it's interesting because we've got, on one end of the spectrum, you've got all this kind of amazing biotech stuff that we, creating vaccines using technology that you just, wouldn't have done years ago. And then yet, Claire, I'm sure you see on the other end of the spectrum, there's some very sort of almost like basic uses of technology that would massively improve efficiency and outcomes in GP surgeries or in A&E. What are some of the big, perhaps low-hanging fruit that, ways that we can use tech in hospitals or in just, general patient care that still aren't quite being taken advantage of?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are obviously so many. Digital is starting to have an impact in healthcare, but it's still very early, really. We saw some significant acceleration during the pandemic, particularly with telehealth, access to telehealth consultations. But certainly things are accelerating. There's lots of investment in this space now, of course, and so many amazing entrepreneurs starting company and a lot of collaboration between big companies and smaller companies, which is amazing. But we're still early in this journey, and certainly around better access, convenience, and hopefully driving transparency in prices in countries where prices are, very high, often self-pay or large co-pays, and bringing that down, more choice and so forth. But I also see, I'm very excited about sort of the convergence of technology innovation across not just digital and, of course, data and access to data, ability to sort of compute a lot of data and AI, but also biotech and the amazing things that are happening there, genomics, multiomics, immunology, and so forth, and of course all the sensor data we have now. So it's a lot of it has, of course, we've had a lot of this data being used by people for general wellness and fitness and sleep monitoring and so forth, but more and more it's clinical grade, medical devices, all coming to your smart watch, and when you sort of pull all of this together, the exciting things that we'll be able to do in certainly personalization, prediction, early detection, continuous assessment, sort of being able to detect aberrations and things very early when hopefully things are far more preventable, and in that sort of moving further and further towards not just sick care, which is the vast majority of how we spend our time in healthcare right now and where we're spending all the money, but more preventative and really managing and optimizing health and avoiding disease. So I really see these things converging now and accelerating, and that's the future.
And what needs to happen, or who needs to make it happen, that this stuff happens faster? Dora, you were talking a bit about this before, that, you know, it's happening, but like it's been happening for a while, and like it happened faster during COVID, and how do we kind of, I guess, keep up that momentum, sort of not let this dribble on for the next 10 years when it could happen now?
Yes, so from my point of view, and it's obviously coming from the point of view of the startup, there has to be a conciliation of interests in order to really sustain this growth of interest and to put it into profit. So the fact that we saw such a fast solution coming forth from tech, right? Vaccines showing up into the market at this rate never happened before. I mean, not to my knowledge, I don't think so. So this was extraordinary, right? And I think this is also impactful. However, there are burdens along the way before this can happen. They were followed to the letter. There is a regulatory, there is a governance system, and all these systems are slowly becoming aware that there is another wave of tech that is coming, that needs to be implemented, that actually the population wants it. Otherwise, we would not have so much users for tech like yours, right, and others. So there is a wave of request of having more access to your own data and your own health, which I understand. There is another need, which is to give information with the right support to the patient, professional support, and all these steps need governance. This comes from the requests of the startups, the population, pharma, biotech, digital health, etc. And I think that slowly, but surely, the consensus needs to arise from all these stakeholders. But you asked me something different, which is how do we speed up this process? I think it's by use cases, right? Showing to the population that a vaccine was made, or several vaccines were made at a certain speed, with a certain measurable safety and efficacy is extraordinary. Having digital health, such as our proposition, or medtech that is based on digital, such as our proposition at Blazar, is feasible. There is already the seed of regulatory and a seed of governance on how to use this tech in the real world. But now these notions are in the population. It's a push that has to be done collectively, it's my point of view, and it has to be done in accordance to with the population's requests. I think that it is very evident that when we go into a hospital like we do and we speak with clinicians, they are avid of using our product. They do not fear it. They do not fear using the tech. They understand the technology behind it. They understand there's also the science. There's no fear there, and I think that this step has been gone through steadily from certain part of the population. Now from the patient, I understand that there will be some sort of doubts or a little bit of information that is needed to be put forward, right? But I also see, on the other hand, a lot of patients saying that they want to participate in clinical trials, that they want tech to be used in a regulated manner, and with their consent to benefit their condition. So there is really a mentality shift that comes with its own regulatory challenges. I understand that, but it comes with the benefits of tech bringing a solution into the real world.
Melissa, do you agree with that? Or are you like, oh no, the regulators are the same that they've always been?
Well, I think the regulators are needing to adjust to the pace at which we can make new medicines, and to the all these amazing digital tools that you're talking about, where patients can and clinical trial participants can actually report in real time what their experience is. And so a lot of what we and other companies in the space have been doing is actually educating the regulators about what is now possible. And so I think they're working very hard to catch up. And thinking about these digital medicines, where each medicine, as you're making a new one, builds on the last one, and it isn't a unique thing. And so we're really trying to push the pace at which we can get new medicines to people with unmet medical health needs. And I think all of these things that we're talking about are really going to make that much more possible.
Claire, what are some of the big, I guess, challenges or hurdles you see still hanging around?
Well, I think that the key is to the regulators, and their job is to make sure things are both efficacious and safe. And so when there is some kind of new technology, there are many, many questions about it, and rightfully so. And so as we as a community address those questions, and both the regulators and the public feel more comfortable with new medical technologies, I think that's going to get better. But it takes some time to, as I said, educate people. So I think one of the big hurdles is educating both the medical community and the general public about what are these new technologies, and how are they, they're not scary. In fact, they're there to help everyone, and how can they be implemented as efficiently but safely as possible.
Claire, you were an actual doctor practicing for many years. From your perspective, do doctors still find some digital stuff scary, or they're pretty on board with it now?
Yeah, so I think there's certainly been far more exposure to digital health in the last 18 months, and the need to use a number of digital offerings in order to provide care to your patients. And I do think, there were always the early adopters, the enthusiasts amongst the doctors, and then more skeptical doctors. And skepticism can be healthy. It can be healthy skepticism or less healthy skepticism, because obviously we work in a highly complex industry, a lot of risks and regulation, and doctors want to see that something's proven. They want to see evidence to know that it's safe, that the benefits outweigh the risks, and so forth. So I think rightly so, they ask questions, and they want to see that these things actually do have a positive impact on patient care. And of course, they also are so busy and pressured, they don't want things that add to that burden. They want things that reduce that burden. So I definitely think that when digital health products do that, and they provide safe, impactful support to the doctors and to patients, and there's evidence for it, then doctors are embracing it. But obviously we're on that journey, all of us, to maturing as an industry and providing this kind of evidence, working with the regulators, as Melissa was saying. There's certainly been a lot of challenges. There's been a lot of change in the regulations here in Europe for medical devices and software as a medical device in recent years. And we sort of have to work through these changes. They are important, they're needed. They actually, once you comply with those things and you can show that, it helps drive trust and enforces high quality and ensuring sort of checking, looking for the risks and thinking about all of these things early for companies and drives the trust. But we sort of have to work together with doctors, with the regulators to shape things going forward. I've seen a lot of fantastic progress in the last years, and it's sort of a journey, an ongoing journey.
So, well done, someone in the audience who's asked a question. You've made Roxanne very happy. And ask some more, we have time, which feeds in a bit to this. What are some of the things that health tech companies can or have to do to combat the kind of mistrust and misinformation that can be out there around technology? Melissa, you're nodding.
I think it's education, and being very open about things and really opening up the books more. I mean, we were the first company that I know of that opened up our clinical trial design for our vaccine. And we also slowed down our phase 3 clinical trial in order to ensure that the participants in the trial were more representative of our entire population and not just a subset of it. And so the more that we can be just open about communicating and educating people about these new technologies, the more people will come to trust because they won't be afraid of them.
How challenging is it to kind of, I guess, explain, some of these technologies are not exactly easy to get your head around. I mean, Dora, I totally mucked up my introduction to your company. How much, how do you kind of get around that? Is it just very clear and simple communication, or?
I think that, first of all, transparency is important. Sometimes it comes to detriment of simplicity. So the equilibrium is important, and I think that being open to scrutiny, to the skepticism of others, is extremely important, and reply to it with transparency and real data is important. Then when you are addressing a public that does not have a scientific knowledge or clinical knowledge, it is important to explain in all truth what is the benefit for that population of having access to that technology. How are things going to change with you acting on this problem? So I think this is it's very important to do so. It's a fine equilibrium between giving enough information that is giving enough trust, because you're saying the truth, you're saying what is really the benefit of your product, but doing it in a simple way so that you don't get more mistrust from the complexity of the words that you are using. So this is one approach, and it ties well with education. How do we explain our product that is deep tech to a user or a benefiter of the tech? Then about mistrust, I think we need to surround ourselves of other people that do understand what we are doing and not walk the path alone. So walking collectively the path will allow you to be, yes, scrutinized, validated, regulated, and hopefully, in the end, what you will have is a product that will be well accepted because a mass of people is actually saying, okay, I can put my stamp on this. This works. So the population should not be scared of it.
How does it work, Claire, when you're developing kind of consumer products in healthcare? Because in lots of areas, the customer knows best. But I'm guessing in medicine, sometimes they really, really don't. Like, how do you deal with that?
So just a little bit of background. So we built our technology actually first for doctors. So we started off building a probabilistic diagnosis decision support system for specialists. We expanded it to GPs, and then we decided the bigger impact is going to be going directly to the patient, to the end user, and doing the assessment. Also, GPs don't have much time, so adding the work of entering information, even if it's just a few clicks, is too much. So sort of we started then pulling, doing pre-assessment, so pulling in the data from the patient to share with the GP, but also launch the app direct to the consumer. So we built something that was deeply sort of clinically reliable and had done a lot of work on accuracy and safety and a lot of testing over many years, but then combined that with this very user-friendly, very intuitive, simple user interface. And I think that's been a huge driver of trust for us and an uptake. But we also don't force users down any particular path at the end of the assessment. We provide information, we explain the assessment outputs. It's never a specific diagnosis at the end of an AIDA assessment. It's information about what may be causing your system with your symptoms, with rough likelihoods based on other people who had symptoms like yours and what they had, and then choices that would be appropriate for what to do next. And I think that's important. Yeah, so you're giving somebody more information and giving them more power, like more control. They have more ability to make an informed decision, but it's their decision and their choice.
Amazing. Well done to another person in the audience who's asked a question. This one I think is for Melissa. What future applications for the mRNA platform do you see having high potential and why? Or which kind of illnesses or diseases is this sort of
So in
ready
addition to vaccines, we're currently in clinical trials for patients who are born with inborn metabolic errors. So they're missing an enzyme that they need to metabolize food. And these are really very drastic diseases like mitochondrial myopathies and things like that. And so I think that mRNA can play a huge role there. We also are in clinical trials for autoimmune diseases, and basically anything that you can imagine where if you can use the human body to make, because basically what we're doing is we're giving your body the instructions to make a protein. So anything that we can program the body to for a limited period of time to make a particular protein, it could be used for. So there are many. I don't want to take up the whole time because if you go to our website, you'll see we have something like 22 things already in clinical trials and many other things coming. But it's really a very flexible technology and has a lot of promise for lots of things.
Melissa, is it still the case that kind of there need to be enough people in the world who are going to buy this vaccine or, use this treatment for kind of companies like yours to develop them? Is that still a kind of challenge? Or with technology, does it kind of make, I guess, financial sense to develop treatments for even very, very rare things?
Oh, it makes financial sense to develop treatments for very rare things also. So some of the diseases that we're going after are ultra rare diseases because one of the things that you can do with mRNAs is actually do personalized medicine quite easily. An example of personalized medicine is our personalized cancer vaccine, where we're making a vaccine just for one person against their own cancer. We're doing that in collaboration with Merck. And so as we do more and more of it, the cost of goods and the cost of research and development keeps going down and down. And so then it will be becoming not cost prohibitive.
Amazing. I think unless anyone has a very quick last question, I think ending on technology's reached the point where we can create personalized cancer treatments for just one person is pretty cool. So thank you very much, Melissa. Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Dora. Thank you, everyone here. This was delightful. And I'm now going to pass over to Roman, who's hosting the next panel.